Maya Chen never imagined her life would come to this. Sitting in the cold hospital waiting room at 2 in the morning, she watched her mother cry silent tears while her older sister Rachel paced back and forth. Phone pressed to her ear, laughing at something her new boyfriend said. The contrast was almost cruel. 3 months ago, Rachel's fiancé Daniel had been in a terrible car accident. He'd been driving home from work when a truck ran a red light and hit his car from the side. The doctor said he was lucky to be alive, but Maya wasn't sure how lucky it was to be trapped in your own body, unable to wake up, unable to speak, unable to live. Daniel had been in a coma ever since that night, and Rachel had visited him exactly twice. The first visit was the day after the accident, when Rachel showed up in full makeup and designer clothes, more concerned about the photographers outside than the man lying motionless in the hospital bed. The second visit was 2 weeks later when Daniel's grandmother practically begged her to come. That visit lasted 20 minutes. Rachel spent most of it checking her social media. Now Rachel was done pretending. She'd met someone new, someone with money and status, and she wanted out. She wanted to break off the engagement to a man who couldn't even open his eyes to release her from their promises. Maya had never felt more disgusted with her own sister, but tonight wasn't about Rachel's betrayal. Tonight was about survival. Their mother's cancer had come back, more aggressive than before, and the medical bills were piling up faster than Maya could count. Her younger brother Kevin had just gotten accepted to his dream university, but without financial help, he'd have to give up that dream and work instead. The family was drowning, and there was no life raft in sight. That's when Mrs. Anderson, Daniel's grandmother, made her proposal. Maya had met her only once before, at Rachel and Daniel's engagement party last year. She remembered a kind woman with gentle eyes and a warm smile, the type of grandmother everyone wishes they had. Mrs. Anderson had pulled Maya aside that night and told her she seemed like a sweet girl, someone with a good heart. Maya had blushed and thanked her, never knowing how much those words would matter later. Mrs. Anderson sat across from Maya and her mother now, her hands folded in her lap, her expression serious but not unkind. She explained that Daniel needed someone by his side, someone to make medical decisions if needed, someone to show the world he hadn't been abandoned. More than that, she said, he needed someone to talk to him, to remind him he had reasons to fight his way back. I know this is unusual, Mrs. Anderson said quietly, glancing at Rachel, who had finally ended her phone call. I asked Rachel first, of course. She was engaged to my grandson, but she's made her choice clear. Rachel didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. She shrugged and said she had to move on with her life, that waiting for someone who might never wake up wasn't fair to her. Maya wanted to throw something at her. Mrs. Anderson turned to Maya. I know you barely know Daniel. You've met him what, twice? 3 times. But I've watched you these past months. You're the only one from your family who's come to visit him. You sit with him sometimes, don't you? The nurses told me. Maya nodded slowly. It was true. She'd started visiting Daniel a few weeks after the accident, partly out of guilt for her sister's behavior, and partly because she couldn't stand the thought of him lying there alone. She'd bring her art supplies and sketch in his room, sometimes reading articles about art history out loud because the silence felt too heavy. She didn't know if he could hear her. She just hoped that somehow on some level he knew someone cared. I'm prepared to help your family, Mrs. Anderson continued, her voice steady. All of your mother's medical expenses, your brother's full college tuition, a monthly allowance for household expenses. In exchange, I'm asking for someone to marry my grandson and take care of him, to be there for him, to make this strange situation legal so he's protected. The words hung in the air like smoke. Marriage. To a man in a coma. To a stranger. Maya's mother grabbed her hand, squeezing tight. Maya could see the hope and desperation in her eyes. They'd been struggling for so long, working multiple jobs, selling everything they could spare, and still sinking deeper into debt. This offer was impossible and miraculous and terrifying all at once. I need to think about it, Maya whispered. Of course, Mrs. Anderson said gently. Take the time you need. But please know I wouldn't ask this if I wasn't desperate. Daniel is everything to me. His parents died when he was young. I raised him. He's a good man, Maya, a kind man. He deserves better than to be forgotten. Over the next 3 days, Maya couldn't think about anything else. She was 26 years old, working as an art teacher at a local elementary school, barely making enough to pay rent on her tiny apartment. She'd always dreamed of opening her own gallery someday, of traveling to see the great museums of Europe, of falling in love with someone who understood her passion for creating beauty in the world. Instead, she was considering marrying a man who couldn't even say hello. She visited Daniel again, standing beside his hospital bed, studying his face. He looked peaceful, almost like he was sleeping normally. Brown hair that needed cutting, a strong jaw, hands that lay still on top of the white blankets. The machines beeped steadily, tracking heartbeats and breathing and all the things that meant he was alive but not living. "I don't know what to do," she told him quietly. "I don't know if this is crazy or kind or just desperate. But my mom needs help. My little brother deserves his chance. And you? You deserve someone who cares." Daniel, of course, didn't answer. In the end, it was Kevin who made the decision for her. Her 17-year-old brother had always been wise beyond his years. When she finally told him about Mrs. Anderson's offer, he was quiet for a long moment. "Are you going to do it?" he asked. "I don't know. It feels wrong somehow. Like I'm taking advantage. Of who? The guy in the coma who needs help? The grandmother who's offering? Mom who might actually survive if she can afford treatment?" Kevin shook his head. "Maya, you've been taking care of everyone else your whole life. You gave up your scholarship to help when Dad left. You've worked 2 jobs to help with bills. Maybe this time helping yourself and helping someone else can be the same thing." 1 week later, Maya stood in a small hospital chapel wearing a simple white dress she'd borrowed from a friend. There was no music, no flowers, no celebration. Just a minister, Mrs. Anderson, her mother, Kevin, and 2 nurses as witnesses. And Daniel, of course, lying in his hospital bed that had been wheeled into the chapel. She held his hand as she said her vows, her voice shaking. She promised to care for him in sickness and in health, for better or worse. The irony wasn't lost on her. This was definitely the worst part, and they were starting there. When the minister pronounced them married, Mrs. Anderson hugged her tight and whispered thank you over and over. Maya's mother cried with relief and gratitude. Kevin gave her an encouraging smile, and Maya looked down at her new husband, this stranger she'd just legally bound herself to, and wondered what she'd just done. His hand was warm in hers but completely still. She wore a simple gold band on her finger now. She was married. She was Mrs. Maya Anderson. That night she moved into the guest room of Mrs. Anderson's house, a modest suburban home with faded wallpaper and creaky floors. Her new mother-in-law showed her around, pointing out where everything was, treating her with kindness that made Maya's throat tight with emotion. "Get some rest, dear," Mrs. Anderson said at the door. "Tomorrow we'll visit Daniel together. And thank you, Maya. Truly. You've given an old woman hope." Maya lay in the narrow guest bed, staring at the ceiling, her wedding ring catching the moonlight from the window. She'd married a man in a coma. A man she didn't know. A man who might never wake up. She'd made a deal to save her family, but she had no idea what she'd truly signed up for. And somewhere in a hospital across town, her husband slept on, unaware that his life had just changed completely. 6 months passed like a strange dream Maya couldn't wake up from. She fell into a routine that felt both normal and completely surreal. Every morning, she'd wake up in the guest room of Mrs. Anderson's house, make breakfast, and head to the elementary school where she taught art to kids who still believed anything was possible. After school, she'd drive straight to the hospital. Room 347 became her second home. She'd pull up the uncomfortable plastic chair beside Daniel's bed and just talk. At first, it felt silly, speaking to someone who couldn't respond. But the nurses encouraged it. They said coma patients could sometimes hear, that familiar voices might help bring them back. So Maya talked. She told him about her day, about the little girl in her class who painted the sky purple because she thought it was prettier that way. She told him about her dreams of opening an art gallery someday, showing the work of artists nobody had discovered yet. She read him articles about new exhibitions at museums across the country. Sometimes she'd just sit quietly and sketch, the soft scratch of her pencil on paper the only sound besides the steady beep of his heart monitor. The hospital staff got to know her. The nurses would smile when she arrived, updating her on Daniel's condition even though it rarely changed. They brought her coffee when she stayed late. They told her she was doing a good thing, that not many people would commit to this kind of care for someone they barely knew. But here's what Maya didn't tell anyone. She didn't feel like a saint. She felt like a fraud. She wore a wedding ring and used a married name, but she didn't feel married. She felt like an actress playing a role, waiting for someone to call cut and end the scene. Sometimes she'd look at Daniel and try to imagine what he was like when he was awake. Mrs. Anderson had shown her pictures of him smiling, laughing with friends, looking confident and alive. The man in the bed seemed like a stranger to that person. Mrs. Anderson's house was modest and comfortable. The elderly woman treated Maya like family, always making sure she ate enough, asking about her day, never making her feel like hired help. They'd have dinner together most evenings, talking about everything and nothing. Maya learned that Daniel had been close to his grandmother, that he'd visit her every Sunday without fail. That detail made Maya's heart hurt a little. He sounded like a good person, someone worth fighting for. One Tuesday evening, Maya arrived at the hospital later than usual. There'd been a parent-teacher conference that ran long, and she was exhausted. She dropped into her usual chair beside Daniel's bed and sighed. "Sorry I'm late," she said to him, like she always did. Mrs. Patterson wanted to discuss her son's art project for 20 minutes. 20 minutes about why Jackson drew monsters instead of flowers. I tried to explain that monsters are more interesting, but she wasn't having it. She pulled out her sketchbook and started drawing, letting her hand move across the page without thinking too much. It was therapeutic, this quiet time. The hospital room had become her sanctuary in a weird way, a place where she didn't have to pretend or perform. She could just exist, you know what's strange? She said softly, not looking up from her drawing. I've been doing this for 6 months now, and sometimes I forget this whole situation is bizarre. I come here, I talk to you, I go home. It's just my life now. Is that weird? That I've gotten used to being married to someone I've never had a real conversation with? She paused, her pencil hovering over the paper. I wonder what you'd think of me if you could hear this. Would you think I'm crazy? Would you be angry that I agreed to this arrangement? Mrs. Anderson says you're kind, that you'd understand, but how can I know for sure? Maya set down her sketchbook and really looked at Daniel's face. In the soft evening light, he looked peaceful. I hope you can hear me somehow, she whispered. I hope you know you're not alone. And I hope you come back. I'd like to actually meet you someday. She reached out and took his hand, something she'd started doing in recent weeks. His hand was warm, and holding it made her feel less alone too. The doctors say there's still a chance. Your brain activity is good. You could wake up any time. Or you might not wake up for years, or maybe never. I hate that they can't give a straight answer. But I'll keep coming. I promised I would, and I keep my promises. Then it happened. So subtle she almost missed it. His fingers moved. Just the tiniest squeeze against her palm. Barely noticeable. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She stared at their joined hands, wondering if she'd imagined it. Daniel? She whispered. Can you hear me? Nothing. The machines continued their steady rhythm. His eyes remained closed. Maya waited, her heart pounding, but there was no other movement. She must have imagined it. Hope could play tricks on you, but she was wrong. Over the next 3 days, there were more signs. His fingers would twitch. His eyelids would flutter. The doctors got excited, running tests, adjusting medications, telling Mrs. Anderson and Maya that he was showing signs of emerging from the coma. It was happening. He was coming back. Maya was terrified. For 6 months, she'd been safe in this strange arrangement. Daniel couldn't judge her, couldn't question her, couldn't reject this marriage they'd been forced into. But once he woke up, everything would change. He'd want answers. He'd want to know why a stranger was claiming to be his wife. He might be furious. He might demand an annulment immediately. On a Friday evening, 1 week after that first finger squeeze, Maya sat beside Daniel's bed like always. She'd brought a book this time, a novel about artists in Paris in the 1920s. She'd just started reading the second chapter when she heard it. A sound, a soft groan. Her eyes shot to Daniel's face. His eyelids were moving, actually fluttering open. She dropped the book and leaned forward, her hands shaking. Daniel, can you hear me? I'm going to call the nurse, okay? Just hold on. She pressed the call button frantically, never taking her eyes off him. His eyes opened slowly, unfocused and confused. He blinked several times, trying to make sense of the bright hospital lights. Maya's heart was hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. Nurses rushed in, followed quickly by a doctor. They moved around the bed efficiently, checking his vitals, shining lights in his eyes, asking him questions. Maya stepped back, suddenly feeling like she shouldn't be there, like she was intruding on something private. Mr. Anderson, can you hear me? The doctor asked. Blink once for yes. Daniel blinked, once, deliberately. Good, very good. Do you know where you are? Daniel's eyes moved slowly around the room, taking in the hospital equipment, the white walls, the concerned faces. He looked confused and scared. Maya's heart broke for him. You were in an accident, the doctor explained gently. You've been in a coma for 6 months. But you're going to be okay. We're going to take good care of you. They ran more tests, asked more questions. Daniel couldn't speak yet, his throat too weak from months of disuse, but he could nod and shake his head. He seemed to understand what was happening, though the fear in his eyes never quite faded. Finally, after what felt like hours, the medical team stepped back. The doctor smiled at Daniel. You're doing great. We'll let you rest now, but we'll be monitoring you closely. This is excellent progress. As the nurses filed out, one of them touched Maya's shoulder. You should talk to him. Familiar voices helped, but Maya felt frozen. This was the moment she'd been dreading. She stepped closer to the bed slowly, seeing Daniel's eyes track her movement. He watched her with confusion, trying to place her face. Hi, she said softly, her voice shaking. My name is Maya. You don't know me. Well, you don't remember me. This is going to sound really strange, and I'm so sorry, but I need to tell you something. Daniel's eyebrows drew together slightly. He looked scared and confused, and Maya wanted to run from the room. 6 months ago, after your accident, your grandmother needed someone to help care for you, to make medical decisions and be here for you. And my family needed help too, so we made an arrangement. She paused, swallowing hard. Daniel, I'm your wife. We got married while you were in a coma. The confusion in his eyes turned to shock. He stared at her like she'd grown a second head. Maya couldn't tell if he was angry or just overwhelmed, but she pushed forward. I know how this sounds. I know this is the last thing you want to hear right now. But I promise you, I've tried to take care of you. I've been here almost every day. I've talked to you and read to you and I've tried to make sure you weren't alone. A single tear rolled down Daniel's cheek. Maya felt her own eyes filling with tears. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry this happened to you. But you're awake now. You're going to be okay. And whatever you want to do about this marriage, about me, I'll understand. I promise. Daniel closed his eyes, and Maya didn't know if it was from exhaustion or if he just couldn't bear to look at her anymore. Either way, everything had changed. The man she'd spent 6 months caring for was finally awake, and she had no idea what would happen next. The first 2 weeks after Daniel woke up were the most awkward of Maya's life. He was polite but distant. Like she was a stranger he had to be nice to because it was the right thing to do, which technically she was. A stranger who happened to be his wife on paper. Daniel's recovery was slow but steady. He had to relearn basic things like walking without getting dizzy and building up his strength. Physical therapists came daily, helping him through exercises that left him exhausted. Maya tried to help, but he always politely declined. I can manage, he'd say, not rudely, just firmly. Creating distance between them, she understood. If she'd woken up from a coma to find out she'd been married off to someone she didn't know, she'd probably feel violated too. But understanding didn't make it hurt less. For 6 months, she'd sat beside his bed, talking to him, caring for him, building a one-sided relationship in her head. Now that he was awake, she realized how foolish that had been. He didn't know her. He didn't owe her anything. Mrs. Anderson tried to ease the tension. She'd invite them both for dinner, forcing conversation about neutral topics like the weather or shows on television. Daniel would answer his grandmother's questions but rarely looked at Maya. When he did, his expression was unreadable. Sometimes Maya caught something that looked almost like curiosity in his eyes, but it would disappear before she could be sure. Maya went back to her normal routine, teaching during the day and returning to Mrs. Anderson's house in the evenings. But now Daniel was there, sitting in the living room or doing physical therapy in the spare room. The house felt smaller somehow, charged with an uncomfortable energy. She started staying late at school, grading papers she could have graded at home just to avoid the awkwardness. One evening, about 3 weeks after Daniel woke up, Maya came home to find him in the living room on a phone call. She wouldn't have thought much of it except he switched to speaking in what sounded like Mandarin the moment he saw her. She didn't speak Mandarin, but she recognized the language. When he hung up, he offered no explanation, just nodded at her and went upstairs to his room. It was strange. Who was he talking to? And why switch languages when she walked in? More odd things started happening. Men in expensive suits would occasionally visit the house, always asking for Daniel. They'd disappear into Mrs. Anderson's study for hours, and Maya could hear muffled conversations through the door. She asked Mrs. Anderson about it once, and the elderly woman just smiled and said they were old friends of Daniel's, checking on his recovery. But they didn't look like friends. They looked like business people, serious, professional, carrying leather briefcases and checking expensive watches. Maya noticed other things too, little details that didn't quite add up. The house itself was modest, sure, but one day she'd gone looking for a vase in the basement and found a wine cellar. Not just a few bottles, but rows and rows of them, carefully organized and climate-controlled. Out of curiosity, she'd looked up one of the labels on her phone later. The bottle cost $3,000. One bottle. Who keeps that kind of wine in a suburban basement? Then there was Daniel's watch. He wore it every day, a simple-looking thing with a brown leather strap. But Maya had seen that exact watch in a magazine article about vintage timepieces. It had sold at auction for over $50,000. She'd stared at the picture for 10 minutes, convinced she was wrong, but no, same design, same markings. She knew because she noticed details. It was part of being an artist. She started paying more attention. The paintings on the walls that she'd assumed were prints, they had the texture of real oil paint, the kind you only get with originals. The simple furniture in the living room. When she looked closely at a side table, she found a maker's mark from a famous craftsman, whose pieces were in museums. Nothing made sense. Mrs. Anderson lived modestly. She shopped at regular grocery stores, clipped coupons from the newspaper, wore comfortable clothes from department stores. But the house was filled with things that cost more than Maya made in a year. What was going on? One Friday evening, Maya was in the kitchen making tea when Daniel came downstairs. He'd been doing better lately, moving around more easily, looking less exhausted. He paused when he saw her, and for a moment she thought he might turn around and leave. But instead he walked to the refrigerator and got a bottle of water. "How was your day?" he asked, and Maya almost dropped her mug. It was the first time he'd asked her a personal question since waking up. "It was good," she said carefully. "We did a project on color theory with the kids. One of them mixed every color together and was upset when it turned brown. I had to explain that's just how paint works." The corner of Daniel's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Did they believe you?" "Not really. She's convinced I'm lying and that if she tries hard enough, mixing all the colors will make a rainbow." "That's kind of beautiful thinking, actually. Optimistic." "Yeah," Maya said softly. "I didn't want to crush it completely." They stood in silence for a moment. It wasn't comfortable exactly, but it wasn't as hostile as before. Daniel seemed like he wanted to say something, opening his mouth and then closing it again. "Maya," he finally said, "I know this has been weird. For both of us. I'm sorry if I've been cold. I'm just trying to figure out how to handle all of this." "I understand," Maya said quickly. "Really, I do. I'm sorry too. I'm sorry about the whole situation. I never wanted to take advantage or make you feel trapped." "I don't think you took advantage," Daniel said, surprising her. "My grandmother told me about your family, about why you agreed. I'm not angry about that. I'm just—" He paused, searching for words. "I'm trying to figure out what's real. Does that make sense?" Before Maya could answer, Mrs. Anderson came into the kitchen looking flustered. "Daniel, there's a call for you. They say it's urgent. Something about the company?" Daniel's expression changed instantly, shifting from open to guarded. "I'll take it in the study." He left quickly and Maya stared after him. "Company? What company?" Mrs. Anderson busied herself making tea, not meeting Maya's eyes. The older woman was hiding something. Maya could feel it. That night Maya couldn't sleep. She lay in her guest room bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about wine cellars and expensive watches and mysterious business calls. She thought about the men in suits, about Daniel switching to a different language when she entered the room. Something wasn't adding up, and it was driving her crazy. The next morning, she decided to do something she normally wouldn't do. She Googled Daniel Anderson. His full name was Daniel James Anderson, and she'd never thought to look him up before. She'd been so focused on the situation, on her family's needs, on just surviving day by day, that it hadn't occurred to her to search for information about the man she'd married. The search results loaded, and Maya's breath caught in her throat. The first result was a news article from 7 months ago. The headline read, "Tech CEO Daniel Anderson takes leave for health reasons." She clicked on it with shaking hands. The article talked about Daniel Anderson, the 32-year-old founder and CEO of Anderson Technologies, a software company worth billions. Billions. With a B. The article mentioned his innovative work in artificial intelligence and cloud computing, his company's rapid growth, and how his sudden leave of absence had shocked the tech world. There were photos. Daniel in a suit at tech conferences, Daniel accepting awards, Daniel on the cover of business magazines, and there in one photo was the watch she recognized, the $50,000 watch he wore every day like it was nothing. Maya felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. She scrolled through more results. Forbes articles about his wealth, interviews about his success, photos of him at charity events wearing tuxedos that probably cost more than her car. He wasn't just well off. He was incredibly, stupidly, impossibly rich, and nobody had told her. She marched downstairs, her phone clutched in her hand, and found Daniel in the living room. He looked up when she entered, and something in her expression must have given her away because his face went carefully blank. "You're rich," Maya said flatly. Not a question, a statement. Daniel sighed and set down the book he'd been reading. "Yes, like really rich. Like run a billion-dollar company rich? Yes. And nobody thought to mention this to me? I've been married to you for 6 months and nobody thought I should know." Mrs. Anderson appeared in the doorway looking guilty. Daniel glanced at his grandmother, then back at Maya. "It's complicated," Daniel said. "Complicated?" Maya's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. "I've been treating you like a normal person. I've been worrying about imposing, about being a burden, about whether Mrs. Anderson could afford having me here. And this whole time, you could probably buy this entire neighborhood without blinking. That's exactly why we didn't tell you," Daniel said quietly. He stood up, moving slowly. He still wasn't at full strength. "Maya, think about it. When you sat with me in the hospital, when you talked to me and read to me, you didn't know. You had no idea about the money. And that's the first time in my entire adult life that someone cared about me without dollar signs in their eyes." "That's not fair," Maya said, her anger deflating slightly. "That's not fair to lie to me about something this big." "You're right," Daniel admitted. "It's not fair. But when I woke up and my grandmother told me about you, about how you came almost every day, about how you decorated my hospital room with drawings from your students, about how you'd just sit and talk to me about art and life and your dreams, I wanted to know if it was real. If you were real." Maya felt tears prickling her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "So this was a test?" "You were testing me?" "No," Daniel said firmly. "Not a test. I just wanted time to understand who you were before everything changed. Before the money changed things." "The money already changed things," Maya said bitterly. "That's why I married you in the first place, remember? Your grandmother paid my mother's medical bills, paid for my brother's college. This whole thing has always been about money, Daniel. You can't pretend it hasn't been." She was right, and they both knew it. But there was more to it now. Layers of complication that Maya couldn't even begin to untangle. She felt manipulated and stupid and angry, but also confused because she understood in a twisted way why they'd kept it from her. "I need some air," she said finally. "I need to think." She grabbed her coat and walked out of the house, leaving Daniel and Mrs. Anderson standing in the living room. She walked for hours, through the neighborhood, past the park where kids were playing, down streets she'd driven but never explored on foot. Everything felt different now. The modest house wasn't modest. It was just where a rich man chose to recover in private. The simple wedding ring on her finger wasn't a symbol of a humble arrangement. It was probably worth more than she realized. She'd been living in a carefully constructed illusion, and now that it had cracked, she couldn't unsee the truth beneath. She'd married a stranger, but somehow discovering he was rich made him feel like even more of a stranger. And the worst part was the small voice in her head asking, if she'd known the truth from the beginning, would she have agreed? Would she have signed up for this if she'd known she was marrying a billionaire? She honestly didn't know. And that uncertainty scared her more than anything else. Maya spent the next 3 days avoiding Daniel as much as possible. She'd leave early for school and come home late, eating dinner alone in her room. It was childish, she knew, but she needed space to process everything. The man she'd been taking care of wasn't who she thought he was. Nothing was what she thought it was. Mrs. Anderson tried to talk to her, but Maya politely declined. She wasn't angry at the elderly woman, not really. She understood why they'd kept the secret, but understanding didn't make the betrayal sting any less. She'd felt like she was helping someone who needed her, like she mattered in this strange situation. Now she felt like a pawn in some elaborate game she didn't understand. On the fourth day, something happened that made everything worse. Maya was at school during her lunch break when her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize, but she answered anyway. "Is this Maya Chen?" a professional-sounding woman asked. "Yes, this is Maya." "Wonderful. My name is Catherine Mills, and I'm the director of the Riverside Gallery downtown. I'm calling because we've been reviewing portfolios for our new Emerging Artist Showcase, and your work has been selected as one of our featured artists. Congratulations." Maya's heart stopped. The Riverside Gallery was one of the most prestigious art galleries in the city. Getting featured there was a dream come true, the kind of opportunity that could launch a real career. "I'm sorry, what? I didn't submit a portfolio to your gallery." "Oh, someone must have submitted it on your behalf. We do accept third-party submissions. Regardless of how it reached us, your work is absolutely stunning. We'd love to have you as part of our spring exhibition. Would you be available to meet next week to discuss details?" Maya agreed in a daze, writing down the date and time. After she hung up, she sat staring at her phone. Someone had submitted her work. But who and why? She had a sinking feeling she knew the answer. That evening, she confronted Daniel. She found him in Mrs. Anderson's study, working on a laptop. He looked up when she entered, and she saw hope flash across his face before he carefully hid it. "Did you do it?" Maya asked without preamble. "The gallery. Did you get me into the Riverside Gallery?" Daniel closed his laptop slowly. "Maya, I can explain." "That's a yes, then." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Of course it is. Let me guess, you donated a bunch of money to them, and suddenly they're interested in featuring a nobody art teacher?" "It's not like that," Daniel said, standing up. "Maya, please sit down and let me explain." "I don't want to sit down. I want the truth." "Did you buy my way into that gallery?" "I funded their Emerging Artist program," Daniel admitted. "But I didn't buy you the spot. The selection committee chose you based purely on your work. I made sure of it. Look, I have the documentation right here." He pulled up files on his laptop showing her emails and selection notes. The gallery had implemented a blind review process where all names were removed from submissions. A panel of 3 art experts had reviewed the work independently and scored each portfolio. Maya's work had received the highest scores in her category. "The gallery director's notes are all here," Daniel said, turning the laptop toward her. "They chose you because your work is good, Maya. Really good. I just created the opportunity. I didn't influence the decision." Maya stared at the screen, reading through the evaluation notes. Words like innovative perspective and emotional depth and technical excellence jumped out at her. They'd chosen her work. Not her name, not her connections, just her work. But it still felt wrong somehow, tainted. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why would you do this?" "Because I've spent the last month listening to my grandmother talk about you. About how you've always dreamed of having your art in a real gallery. About how talented you are, but how you've never had the chance to showcase your work properly. And I thought maybe I could help. Maybe I could do something good with all this money I have. You should have asked me first." "You're right," Daniel said simply. "I should have. I'm sorry." Before Maya could respond, the doorbell rang. Mrs. Anderson called out that she'd get it, and they heard the door open. Then they heard a voice that made Maya's blood run cold. "Hello, Mrs. Anderson. Is Daniel here? I heard he's made a full recovery." Rachel, her sister, was here. Maya and Daniel exchanged glances and walked toward the front door. Rachel stood in the entryway wearing a designer dress and heels that probably cost more than Maya's monthly salary. Her hair was perfect, her makeup flawless, and beside her stood a man in an expensive suit who looked uncomfortable to be there. "Rachel," Maya said flatly, "what are you doing here?" "I came to see Daniel, of course," Rachel said with a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I heard the wonderful news that he's awake. I've been so worried." It was such an obvious lie that Maya almost laughed. Rachel hadn't been worried for a single second. She'd abandoned Daniel without a second thought. But now that he was awake and she'd probably learned about his wealth, suddenly she cared again. "You should leave," Maya said. "Why?" "I was engaged to Daniel first. We have history. We have a connection." Rachel looked past Maya to where Daniel stood. "Daniel, darling, surely you remember what we had. Before the accident, we were so happy together." Daniel's expression was cold in a way Maya had never seen. We were never happy, Rachel. You were dating someone else behind my back for months. I knew about it before the accident. Rachel's perfect smile faltered. That's not true. Who told you that? You did. You pocket-dialed me one night while you were with him. I heard everything. Daniel's voice was calm but firm. I was planning to end our engagement the week I had the accident. So no, we don't have a connection. We never really did. The man beside Rachel shifted uncomfortably. Maya realized with a start that this must be the boyfriend Rachel had left Daniel for. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Things are different now. Rachel tried again, desperation creeping into her voice. I made a mistake. I was confused. But we could start over. You and I, we make sense together. We come from the same world. No, Daniel said simply. We don't, and even if we did, I'm married. To Maya. Rachel's eyes snapped to Maya, and for the first time she really looked at her younger sister. There was anger there and jealousy, and something else Maya couldn't quite identify. This arrangement isn't real, Rachel said. Everyone knows it was just a business deal. You can get an annulment. I don't want an annulment, Daniel said, and Maya's head snapped toward him. He was looking at her, not Rachel. Maya has been more of a partner to me in the past 6 months than you ever were in 2 years, Rachel. She cared for me when I couldn't care for myself. She asked for nothing in return. That's real. What we had was never real. Rachel's face flushed with anger. You'll regret this. Both of you. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person she is. How she took advantage of a man in a coma. How she trapped you into this marriage for money. Try it, Daniel said calmly, and I'll tell everyone the truth. About your affair. About how you abandoned me the moment I was no longer useful to you. About how you're only here now because you found out about my money. Go ahead, Rachel. Let's see whose story people believe. Rachel opened her mouth, then closed it. She grabbed her boyfriend's arm and turned toward the door. But she stopped and looked back at Maya one more time. You think you've won something? Rachel said bitterly. But you're just like me, Maya. You married him for money too. The only difference is you're better at pretending you didn't. She left, slamming the door behind her. The silence that followed was deafening. Mrs. Anderson excused herself quietly, leaving Maya and Daniel alone in the hallway. Maya felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. Because Rachel was right, wasn't she? She had married Daniel for money. For her mother's medical bills. For Kevin's tuition, for her family's survival. The fact that she'd also tried to care for him, tried to make the situation less cold and transactional, didn't change the fundamental truth. She's wrong, Daniel said softly, reading her thoughts. You're nothing like her. How do you know? Maya's voice cracked. You don't even know me, Daniel. Not really. I know you better than you think, Daniel said. He moved closer but didn't touch her. My grandmother told me everything. How you visited me even before the marriage arrangement. How you'd bring your students' artwork to brighten my room. How you'd stay late just to make sure I wasn't alone. You didn't have to do any of that. Nobody was paying you for those visits. Maya felt tears building behind her eyes. I felt guilty. Because of Rachel. Because someone should have cared about you. Maybe that's how it started, Daniel said. But that's not why you kept coming back. I've listened to the nurses, Maya. They said you'd talk to me about your dreams, your fears, your life. You shared yourself with someone you thought couldn't hear you. That's not guilt. That's compassion. A tear rolled down Maya's cheek. I don't know what this is anymore. This marriage, this situation. I don't know what's real. Then let's figure it out, Daniel said. Together. No more secrets. No more tests. Just two people trying to understand what this could be. Before Maya could respond, her phone rang. It was the principal from her school. She answered, confused about why he'd be calling after hours. The conversation lasted 2 minutes, and with each word, Maya felt her world crumbling more. Parents had been calling the school. Someone had sent the school board a detailed letter about Maya's inappropriate marriage arrangement. Questions were being raised about her character, her judgment, her fitness to teach children. The principal was sympathetic but firm. She was being placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. When she hung up, she told Daniel what happened. His expression darkened. Rachel, he said, she must have sent that letter. She said she'd ruin you. Maya sank onto the stairs, her head in her hands. Her teaching job was her identity, her passion. She'd worked so hard to become a teacher, to make a difference in kids' lives. And now it was all falling apart because of a choice she'd made to save her family. I'll fix this, Daniel said firmly. I'll call my lawyers. We'll fight this. With what, more money? Maya looked up at him. Don't you see, Daniel? That's the problem. Money can't fix everything. It can't make people trust me again. It can't change what I did. I married you for money. Rachel's right about that. And now everyone's going to know. She stood up, wiping her tears. I think I need to go stay with my mother for a while. I need space to think, to figure out what I want. What's real and what's just, I don't know. Gratitude or obligation or whatever this is. Daniel looked like he wanted to argue, but he nodded instead. If that's what you need. But Maya, I meant what I said to Rachel. This marriage, it means something to me. You mean something to me? I don't know if that's enough, Maya whispered. She went upstairs and packed a bag. As she left Mrs. Anderson's house, she didn't look back. She couldn't. Because if she did, she might not have the strength to leave. And right now, leaving felt like the only honest thing she could do. Maya spent 2 weeks at her mother's apartment, sleeping in her childhood bedroom with its faded wallpaper and memories of simpler times. Her mother didn't ask many questions, just made tea and let Maya talk when she was ready. Kevin came home from college that first weekend and gave her a long hug without saying a word. Sometimes that was exactly what she needed. The school board investigation hung over her like a dark cloud. She'd received a formal letter outlining the complaints and asking her to provide a statement. The accusations felt dirty and wrong, twisting her marriage into something predatory when it had been anything but. She'd been trying to help everyone, including Daniel, and now it was being used to destroy her career. But something unexpected happened. Her students' parents started calling the school. Not to complain, but to defend her. They talked about how Ms. Chen had stayed late to help their kids with projects, how she'd bought art supplies with her own money when the school's budget ran out, how she'd made their children feel seen and valued. A petition started circulating, signed by over 200 parents demanding the investigation be dropped. Maya cried when she heard about it. Good tears for once. Daniel had been true to his word and given her space. He didn't call or text constantly, but he sent one message every few days. Simple things. Hope you're doing okay. Or Mrs. Anderson says hi. Once, he sent a photo of a terrible painting and wrote, saw this at a gallery and thought you'd appreciate how bad it is. It made her laugh despite everything. The Riverside Gallery called to confirm her exhibition. The director, Catherine Mills, personally assured Maya that her selection had nothing to do with donations or connections. She sent over the blind review scores and evaluation comments. Maya read them 3 times, letting the words sink in. They'd chosen her because her work was good. That was real. That mattered. During those 2 weeks, Maya did a lot of thinking. She thought about why she'd agreed to marry Daniel in the first place. Yes, it was for her family, but if she was completely honest with herself, it was also because she'd been moved by the thought of him lying alone in that hospital. She'd visited him before the marriage arrangement because something in her couldn't stand the idea of someone being forgotten like that. She thought about the 6 months she'd spent talking to him, sharing her thoughts and dreams with someone she believed couldn't hear. Those moments had been real for her. She'd opened her heart in that hospital room in ways she hadn't with anyone else. The fact that he'd been unconscious didn't make those feelings less valid, and she thought about Daniel himself. The way he'd defended her to Rachel. The way he'd tried to help with the gallery without controlling her choices. The way he'd respected her need for space even though she could tell it hurt him. He wasn't perfect and the secrets had been wrong, but his intentions had been good. On the 15th day, Maya made a decision. She called Daniel and asked if they could meet. Not at Mrs. Anderson's house, somewhere neutral. He suggested a small coffee shop near the park, the kind of place that was quiet and unassuming. The kind of place where a billionaire could just be a regular person having coffee. Daniel was already there when she arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of him. I got you a vanilla latte, he said nervously. That's what you always ordered from the hospital cafeteria. I hope that's still right. The fact that he'd noticed, that he'd remembered, made Maya's heart squeeze. That's perfect. Thank you. They sat in awkward silence for a moment, both sipping their coffee, both unsure how to start. I'm sorry, they said simultaneously, then laughed despite the tension. You first, Daniel said. Maya took a breath. I'm sorry for running away. I was overwhelmed and hurt and I needed time to think. But I should have talked to you instead of just leaving. You had every right to be upset, Daniel said. I'm sorry for not telling you the truth from the beginning. I'm sorry for the gallery thing, for not asking first. I'm sorry that Rachel went after your job. My lawyers are handling it, by the way. We found evidence that she fabricated parts of her complaint. The school board is dropping the investigation. I heard, Maya said. They called yesterday. I can go back to work next week. That's great, Daniel said, and his smile was genuine. Those kids need you. Daniel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Anything. Why do you want this marriage to work? Really, is it guilt? Gratitude? Or is it something else? Daniel set down his coffee and looked directly at her. The first time I heard your voice, I was trapped in darkness. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't let anyone know I was still in there. But I could hear. Not always, not clearly. But sometimes voices would break through. Yours was the one I heard most often. Maya felt tears prickling her eyes but stayed quiet. You'd tell me about your students, about the art you loved, about your dreams, and I remember thinking, even in that fog, that I wanted to meet this person, this woman who visited a stranger and shared her soul with him. When I finally woke up and saw you, it felt like meeting someone I already knew. He reached across the table, not quite touching her hand, but close. These past weeks, being awake, actually talking to you, getting to know the real you beyond just a voice in the dark, I've realized something. I don't want this marriage to work because of guilt or gratitude. I want it to work because I'm falling for you, Maya, the real you. Not the devoted wife who was fulfilling an obligation, but the artist who sees beauty everywhere. The teacher who fights for her students. The woman who's strong enough to walk away when she feels wronged. Maya's tears were falling now, quiet and steady. I'm scared, she whispered. I'm scared this is too complicated. That there's too much money and too many secrets and too weird of a beginning. How do we build something real on this foundation? We start over, Daniel said simply. We date, real dates. I take you to dinner and we talk about normal things. We go to museums and you tell me about art while I try to sound intelligent. We figure out if we actually like each other when we're not in crisis mode. And if it doesn't work out, if we realize we're better as friends, then we figure that out too. And the marriage stays intact until we decide otherwise. No pressure, no expectations. It's just a piece of paper right now. Let's see if we can make it into something more. Maya wiped her tears and smiled. That's the most reasonable thing anyone said to me in months. Is that a yes? It's a yes to trying, to seeing what this could be. Daniel's smile was brighter than she'd ever seen it. Can I take you to dinner tomorrow night? There's this little Italian place downtown that's not fancy. Just good food and quiet corners. No photographers, no publicity, just us. I'd like that, Maya said, but I'm paying for my own meal. Maya, I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. I know. But this is important to me. We split the check or I don't go. Daniel laughed, a real, genuine laugh that made him look years younger. You're going to keep me humble, aren't you? Someone has to. They talked for another hour about small things and big things, about what the next steps looked like. Maya would move back to Mrs. Anderson's house, but they'd give each other space. They'd go on actual dates. They'd introduce each other to their friends. They'd build a relationship the way normal people did, just with the minor complication of already being married. Over the next 3 months, they did exactly that. Daniel took her to art galleries and listened as she explained techniques and movements, asking questions that showed he was really paying attention. Maya went to one of his company events and met his colleagues, watching him work a room with quiet confidence. They had movie nights with Mrs. Anderson, making popcorn and arguing over what to watch. They had their first real fight about something stupid, about whether to have Chinese or Thai food for dinner, and learned how to apologize and compromise. The gallery exhibition was a success. Maya stood in the Riverside Gallery surrounded by her work, watching strangers examine her paintings and discuss their meaning. Daniel was there, but he stood in the back, letting her have her moment. When a reporter asked if her husband was there, Daniel stepped forward and introduced himself simply as Maya's biggest fan. He didn't mention his company or his wealth. He was just a man supporting his wife. 6 months after their coffee shop conversation, Daniel took Maya back to the hospital where they'd first met. He led her to room 347, which was empty now, cleaned and waiting for the next patient. This is where it started, Daniel said, where you sat with a stranger and showed him kindness he didn't deserve. You deserved it, Maya said softly. Everyone deserves to be cared for. I want to do this right, Daniel said. He got down on one knee and Maya's breath caught. I know we're already married. I know we did this backward and weird and probably all wrong. But Maya Chen, I'm in love with you. The real you. The complete you. The you who challenges me and inspires me and makes me want to be better. Will you marry me again? For real this time? Because we choose it, not because circumstances forced us? Maya was crying again, but this time she was smiling through the tears. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Daniel stood and kissed her, and it was their first real kiss, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, Maya laughed. We're going to have such a weird story to tell our kids someday. The weirdest, Daniel agreed, but it's ours. They had a small ceremony 3 months later. Just family and close friends in Mrs. Anderson's backyard. Maya wore a simple dress she'd picked out herself. Daniel wore a suit but no tie, looking relaxed and happy. Kevin walked Maya down the aisle while her mother cried happy tears. Mrs. Anderson beamed from her seat in the front row. This time, when they said their vows, both of them were wide awake. Both of them were choosing this. And when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, it felt like a beginning, not an arrangement. Rachel sent a card with a brief note. I'm sorry for everything. I hope you're happy. Maya tucked it away, accepting the apology but feeling no need to respond. Some chapters closed quietly, and that was okay. Maya kept teaching. Daniel kept running his company, but with better balance. They bought a house together. Not a mansion, but a comfortable place with big windows and a room Maya could use as a studio. She painted there in the evenings while Daniel worked on his laptop, and sometimes they'd just sit in comfortable silence, being together. On their 1-year real anniversary, Daniel asked Maya what she was thinking about. She was sitting in his hospital chair, the one she'd brought home from room 347 because she couldn't let it go, sketching in her notebook. I'm thinking about how strange life is, Maya said. How the worst thing that happened to you, that accident, somehow led to the best thing that happened to me. Us. No regrets? Daniel asked. Maya thought about everything. The fear, the confusion, the heartbreak, the joy, the love that grew in the most unexpected place. She thought about the girl who'd agreed to marry a stranger to save her family and the woman she'd become through that choice. Not a single one, she said, and meant it. Because sometimes love doesn't start with a first date or a chance meeting. Sometimes it starts with a choice to care for someone who can't care for themselves. Sometimes it starts with kindness given freely, with no expectation of return. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, that choice becomes something beautiful, something real, something worth fighting for. Their story had started in a hospital room with a man who couldn't speak and a woman who chose to care anyway. But it became a love story the moment they both decided to choose each other. Fully awake, fully aware, fully committed to building something real from the strangest of beginnings, and that, Maya thought, was the most beautiful art of all.